Shalom and welcome to this edition of Contextual Bible Study. My name is Denny Thompson, and on this lesson we're going to continue what we did last time. This idea of Anti Zionism, which is anti-Israel, the fact that Israel does not have a right to exist, many people are claiming. Now this is going to be the fourth of a five-part series about Israel and how Israel's being attacked. We begin with anti-Semitism, Christian anti-Semitism, and then Muslim anti-Semitism. And now 2 week sessions on this topic, anti-Zionism. And included last time and also today are going to be some experiences that I have had in Israel, in my trips to Israel, probably a little bit more in this one right here, that relate to the topic. Okay. Now, did the Jews always live in the land of Israel? Some people say, no, there was a time period where they didn't live there. But that's not true. So let's just kind of look at the facts here, because that's the whole idea behind what I'm doing here, to try to establish facts, to have good opinions, to understand, even to respond to all these lies that are being told about Israel. But anyway, before the 66 revolt, okay, that would be back near the time that Jesus was here, was in Israel. He was likely 32 AD, but before that 66, it was estimated there's about 3 million Jews living in Israel, roughly. And then after the revolt, the population dropped by a lot, 60 to 70%, between those that were killed and those that were exiled. But still, it was in the hundreds of thousands, with population mostly shifting north up to Galilee is where they actually went, away from Jerusalem to the northern parts. Now, there have been over 100 synagogues discovered in archaeology between the eras of the 2nd and 8th century. So that's obviously evidence of Jewish presence, even just right there. Now, after hundreds of years of Arab rule and suppression and the Crusades, so we're moving ahead in time here, okay, the population fell to as low as 20,000. So that would be kind of a time period between maybe 750 up until 1300, 1350, in that range. So that was like the low point. 20,000 is the estimation. The population began to really rebound by the 1800s into the 1900s as Jews were trying to find safety, with anti-Semitism ramping up on a massive scale. Of course, it's been through all of history, but even more so, the idea began to pass around that why don't we go back to this ancient land? Now, what about modern day history? Well, when the Jews began returning to Israel in much larger numbers, as I mentioned, in the late 19th century, the Arabs soon followed in larger numbers. Now, that's not well known. Many Arabs were hired by the Jews. Many worked together. Jews drained the malarial swamps and brought improved sanitation and health care, cut the infant mortality rate in half. So in other words, why would they come back? Why would the Arabs come back to Israel? Because they could get a better life working with the Jews, and also to take advantage of some of the more improved health care. Now, this is a massive project, trying to restore the land of Israel, because it had really been neglected. And these malarial swamps were, especially in the northern part of the country, were really bad. There's a kibbutz that we had stayed in before where it was estimated about half of the people died during this time period. So this is a really, really tough time period. And yet, there was some cooperation between the Arabs and Jews. Now, many Jews bought additional tracts of land from absentee Arab landlords. So in other words, there were some fairly wealthy Arabs who bought up some of the land in Israel for almost nothing, because a lot of it was pretty just like wasteland. And Jews began to buy this back. Even though most of this land was desert and wasteland, as I mentioned, many of these Jews paid at least 10 times the market value, and sometimes even more. So they paid a lot to start to buy back this land. There are other Arabs who constantly attacked the farmers as they tried to develop this once wasteland. Some of the farmers on the kibbutzim become the military leaders in future war for independence. So in other words, it wasn't all rosy. There were other Arab groups that were constantly attacking as they were trying to restore the land. So these farmers had to have a gun in one hand and a hoe in the other to just try to do their work. That's how it was. So these people who lived on these little farms or these little kibbutzim plural, they become actually really good soldiers because they had to be good farmers and good soldiers. Now, after this 1967 Six-Day War, a 10-year period from about 69 to 79, listen to what happened during that time period. Under Israeli management, now Israel, this is a little bit complicated. They didn't turn this into Israel itself, but they kind of managed the land. They didn't take it over, but they managed it because they had captured it during that war when they'd been attacked by multiple countries. So under their management, the so-called West Bank and Gaza had one of the most dynamic, fastest growing economies in the world. Again, not well known because this is not advertised, it's not talked about. A decade of growth at an average of 30% per year in some cases. The Arab population rose from 1 million to 3 million, while the Jewish population rose to 250,000. Now, this is just in the area that today is called the West Bank. The Bible calls Judea and Samaria. Okay, the per capita income tripled in the West Bank and Gaza. The economy boomed with little foreign aid, very little foreign aid at the time. Palestinian workers in Israel increased greatly. Life expectancy rose from 48 in 67 to 72 by the year 2000. By 86, 92.8% of the population had electricity, as opposed to 20% in 67. Again, this is not well known. This whole area that Israel kind of managed, even though they didn't capture it as part of their country, this West Bank, Judea and Samaria, had this massive improvement in life, including the Arabs who lived here. Now, the Six-Day War, as I mentioned before, that was almost like this miracle war. The map on the left shows the countries who attacked Israel. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, all of a sudden at once, they just came in and attacked Israel at once. And it looked at first people thought this is going to be the end of Israel. But what happened was a miracle. In 6 days, Israel just they pushed them all back, and then they recaptured that land, as I mentioned before, that land called the West Bank, that whole area, and by pushing all these other enemy armies right out of their land. So, after the Six-Day War, the map on the right, you can see the West Bank. You can see an area in the north called the Golan Heights, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then down below, the Sinai Peninsula. Okay, that's how it was kind of divided after the Six-Day War. Now, the land issue. Let's look a little bit close because that is, of course, a big, big deal. Now, back in 1920 to 48, the British kind of occupied this whole area. That's after World War I was done. The Ottoman Empire was defeated, and the British moved in to kind of occupy it, or in the sense, kind of govern it. The overall area. Originally, the British were going to give the Jews the land you're seeing right there. Okay, look at it close. Now, that land includes present-day Israel and present-day Jordan, which Jordan is 3 times the size of Israel. So it's a massive area that they were going to give back to the Jews to create a country. But very soon after, they kind of pulled back on that offer. They took the 70-some% of Jordan, and they called it Transjordan. And then the offer became just the area on the left, what is present-day Israel. That's it. So that's what the offer became very, very, very quick. And eventually the country of Jordan is going to be formed a little bit later. Now, have the Palestinians ever been offered statehood? We hear this all the time. If they just had a state, everything would be great. Most people don't know what I'm about to tell you right now. And this is very important to understand. All of this is important to understand. Yes, not once, 5 times. They've been offered a state 5 times. First time, 1936, the Peel Commission. Under the Peel Commission, Great Britain offered the Arabs 80% of this disputed territory. Even though the Jews were only offered 20%, they accepted it. So, if you look at that map right there, all this area that you can see, this large area in red or pink color, was offered to the Arabs, and the Jews the other section there in blue. Did the Arabs accept it? No, they refused. Rather than accepting it as a country, they continued a violent rebellion against the Jews. So this is in 36. This is actually before Israel became a country. So there's offer number one. Number two, 1947 to 48. The United Nations proposal. They offered Israel approximately 1/5 the size of Michigan, a tiny strip of land that's in yellow there. You can see how it's kind of a hodgepodge in different areas from the north to the south, and a tiny strip along the seacoast. And the Arabs have rejected it. Only this time, they did so by launching an all-out war. Okay, so the war in 47 into 48 happened right here. Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria joined the conflict, but they failed. Israel won the war somehow and got on with the business of building a new nation. How they won this war is an absolute miracle. They really had no chance in terms of any logical chance in terms of warfare. But they did. It truly was a miracle. In fact, I met a man several years ago who fought in this war, Israeli soldier, and he's since passed away. But he was talking about what it was like fighting against all these countries. He said where he was fighting, they had one gun that they had to share for 7 Jewish soldiers. They literally passed it down the line. There's stories like that all over the place, which literally indicate this truly was a miracle. That God wanted this country to be here, clearly. From 48 to 67, Jordan controlled the Jewish quarter of the old city of Jerusalem and this whole West Bank area. Okay, you can see the green area. They expelled the Jews, destroyed the synagogues, and used tombstones and building projects. So they really desecrated Jerusalem, the Jewish quarter, in so many ways. And at that point, they could have set up an independent state, but they did not. They had full authority on doing that at that time. The third time, after the 67 war, the 1967 conflict known as the Six-Day War, which you mentioned before, ended in a stunning victory for Israel. Jerusalem and the West Bank, as well as the area known as Gaza Strip, fell into Israel's hands. So all of that blue, light blue, and pink, all of that Israel controlled after the war, after they had been attacked, and they successfully not only won the war, they won it in 6 days, which was another miracle. The government was split over what to do with the new territory, the government of Israel. Half wanted to return the West Bank to Jordan and the Gaza to Egypt, okay, in exchange for peace, to have them, peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan against Israel, because those are neighboring countries. The other half wanted to give it to the region's Arabs, who began referring to themselves as Palestinians. This is something that Arafat came up with, and I've mentioned before where that whole idea came from. It's a reference to the ancient Philistines. It's not a modern-day people. It literally was an invented term. But anyway, in the hope that they would ultimately build their own new state here. Neither initiative got very far. A few months later, the Arab League, that would be all these Arab countries and others, met in Sudan and issued its famous 3 no's. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no negotiation with Israel. Again, a 2-state solution was dismissed by the Arabs. Chance number 3, and they said, no, we don't even want this. Number 4, in 2000, the Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak met at Camp David with Palestinian Liberation Organization Chairman Yasser Arafat, and to conclude a new 2-state solution plan. Barak offered Arafat a Palestinian state in all of Gaza and 92% of the West Bank, with East Jerusalem as his capital. So he's given up half of Jerusalem, 92% of the West Bank. Okay, that's the offer. Incredibly generous. But the Palestinian leader, Arafat, rejected the offer. Instead, the Palestinians launched a bloody wave of suicide bombings that killed over 1,000 Israelis and maimed thousands more. This happened on buses and wedding halls and pizza parlors with suicide bombers. That was a response to this peace initiative. In fact, that was a response to most of them, violence. Not only no, but violence. In 2008, Israel tried again. Prime Minister Ehud Olmert went even further than Barak he had done. This time he included 94% of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, sovereignty over a big part of East Jerusalem, and the Temple Mount. Like his predecessor, The new Palestinian leader, which there was a new leader at this time because Arafat had died, his name is Mahmoud Abbas, he turned it down too. Now, in this Oslo Accord happened in 1993. This is kind of a superseding event over all these offers. It happened before a couple of the offers, but this is kind of laying the groundwork. Okay, where you can see right here that we have this leader of Yasser Arafat on the left. The guy on the right, he is the prime minister of Israel. His name is Yitzhak Rabin. Okay, he's the guy on the right. And of course, our president, who was setting this up at the time, was going to make this offer, and it was a good faith offer that he really felt might work. Okay, and I think his intentions were good, but things did not work out well. So, 1993, the West Bank, Judea and Samaria was created. The green area is Zone A. This is what they did in that meeting in 1993. All right. In the green areas, Zone A meant the Palestinians had full control. Okay, so that was completely theirs. Zone B, the blue areas, Palestinians had civil control. That means government control. But Israel had the security control over those areas. And then Zone C was under full Israel control, security and government, both. Okay, so it's complicated. The map is very complicated and kind of a hodgepodge map, but there it is. And I want to kind of focus on Bethlehem because we're going to look at that in a second. Bethlehem is in Zone A. So what's Zone A? It's full Palestinian control. So the main ideas behind this Oslo Accord are this. The Palestinian Liberation Organization is going to become the Palestinian Authority. This is really big. They were a terrorist organization, the PLO, under Arafat. They did all kinds of horrible things. They're suddenly given this full authority to be a governmental operation, to be the governmental authority taking over this area, this land. Okay. Now, withdrawal or redeployment of Israel security forces in the West Bank in the Gaza Strip. So the vast majority of the IDF had to leave. There were areas where they stayed in certain pockets, as I mentioned just before, on Zone A, B, and C. Immediate transfer of authority to the Palestinians over matters of education, health, social welfare, taxation, and tourism. The really biggie there is education, which is going to become a cancer that's going to cause problems down to this day because of how they took this over and what they did. Creation of their own police force, and they have a very, very large one, 50,000 policemen. Democratic elections for the Palestinians in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and unfortunately they elected in Gaza, they elected Hamas. Arrangements for coordination between the PLO and Israel on issues of security and economic development. So the goal is to create a Palestinian state, which kind of laid the foundation for these offers that I mentioned previously here. Now, I want you to look at this map to kind of get an idea. This whole idea of what the press calls the West Bank, the Bible calls Judea and Samaria. It's kind of the heartland of Israel where so many big things happen inside of the yellow line. And the yellow line, if you kind of look at the two bodies of water, the big one on the bottom is the Dead Sea, and up above is the Sea of Galilee. The Jordan River connects them. Everything to the right of it is the country of Jordan. So Israel is just the area to the left. And what I want you to look at is how narrow the coastline is. Now, that's where most people live in Israel. It's very narrow. It's only 8 miles wide in places. In other words, if they did create a state to include all that, that's all they have. It's really indefensible. It's impossible. On top of that, the West Bank is the high ground, as you saw. It's kind of a mountainous area. Here's what it looks like. The area by the airport, which is probably about 10 or 12 miles wide. This is Ben Gurion Airport. And we're on above here now. We're in the West Bank, up in that high ground. They're sitting ducks from that high ground. They can launch weapons right down on them with that kind of an arrangement. Most people don't understand that, but that's what the geography looks like. So the high ground would make that part of Israel incredibly susceptible for you name it. Now, there's another high ground area in the north called the Golan Heights. You probably heard about that. Syria controlled that from 46 to 67. And to give you an idea what that is like, they don't control it anymore, but they did until 67. After the 67 war, Israel took control again. But here's what happened when they did have control. It's a high ground overlooking the Sea of Galilee and the areas in the north. Okay, that's the Sea of Galilee below. And just to kind of the left side of it, you can see some white buildings. That's Tiberias. And we're above now because we're up in that Golan Heights. You can see strategically they could shoot down on these cities easily. There's an old cannon sitting there. There's all kinds of minefields and weapons found all over the place because they're constantly shooting down on the Israelis who lived in the low areas below. So as a result of over time, these intifadas are what happened between 2000 and 2004, even after these offers of statehood, of course, which is incredible. 1,137 Israelis were killed during that time period. 8,341 were wounded, but mainly by these suicide bombers. Over 2,700 Palestinians were killed. This is a horrible time in history. My son was going to school in Jerusalem at this time period, and it seemed like there were something happening almost all the time. They could hear explosions in Jerusalem from all these bombings. So to get an idea of the magnitude of that many people dying in this tiny country, Israel has 1/50th the number of people in terms of these number of Jews who live here. So the 1137 number would be equal to 56,800 Americans. That's how many died comparatively during that time period, or 29/11s. So what they had to do immediately was to start building a wall. Even though it's not really a wall, only 5% was the wall, the rest was a fence. It's called the wall, kind of mistakenly. It took 5 years to build it. And what's in the picture there, it's a little bit hard to see, but the areas along the edge there, you can kind of a red line, it's kind of jagged area. That's where the fence, mainly the fence, was all put in the walls. To stop this invasion from the high ground of these terrorists easily going into Israel and in many cases killing themselves to kill Jews. So that's why they built it. And immediately Israel was condemned for this, called an apartheid state. You're just dividing the country up. Well, they couldn't exist. There's no way to live like this. We wouldn't live like this for a day in our country if this was happening to us. You'd have to stop it. You've got to stop it. So that's what they had to do. Now, there's no question it created inconvenience for Palestinians. Many of them worked in Israel, so they had to go through all these checkpoints. They've had to over time. But it reduced the suicide attacks by at least 90% and probably higher. So it had to happen in that sense. Now, this actually is a wall. It's a part of that long structure, mostly fence. And this is in Bethlehem, okay? Now, I put a little insert map here. You can see Jerusalem and then Bethlehem to the south. And I'm going to circle an area right here. Okay. Now, this wall is the most famous of any section of the wall. It's sometimes referred to as the apartheid wall. Okay. And the reason they build it is because that inside that red circle are little suburbs of Jerusalem, especially one called Gilo. The people who lived there after the Palestinians took control of this area, and this is Zone A, remember, Bethlehem, they were getting shot at constantly. Missiles shooting at them, guns. They couldn't live. They couldn't live like that. So Israel was forced to build this tall wall to stop these attacks. That's what they had to do. Okay. Now, I came to this wall one time with a group of people. I've been here more than once, but I want to tell you about that experience really quick. I know I have a lot of experiences in this presentation, but here's what it was. I was with a group touring the West Bank, and the only way you can do this is with a Palestinian guide. And the particular guide we had was, to be honest with you, he was pretty arrogant. He was a Palestinian negotiator, kind of a low-level negotiator, and his whole idea was to try to teach everybody in the bus everything he wanted them to learn, that he wanted them to learn. Okay. So it was interesting. I was sitting in the front of the bus right on the other, to the left of him. He was on the right. And I kind of sat there intentionally because I was thinking I might have a chance to talk to him a little bit during the course of the trip. And I did, as I mentioned a little bit. But anyway, we were here at this wall. He took us here because they always take people here to say, look at Israel, look at the apartheid state, look what they've done. And if you look close on the wall, you can see paintings and words and all that kind of stuff. Well, he gave everybody in a group a can of spray paint. He said, go put something on this wall to tell everybody about Israel, how bad they are, what they've done here. Okay, now several of our group took cans of spray paint and started to put things on the wall, just as you see right there in front of you. I didn't. I walked back away from the wall because I wasn't going to be doing that. And interesting enough, a few people came back with me. And what was interesting, as we were kind of together, I could see that our guide was looking at me like, why are you not up here the rest? I had got a chance to talk to those people and tell them the following. Here's what he's not telling you. He's not telling you why they built this wall. Just what I just said, this whole idea of Gilo, these suburbs being attacked. These people couldn't live there anymore. That's why they built the wall. So that was kind of an interesting situation. He never knew exactly what we were talking about, but I know he wasn't real happy. Anyway, this is Bethlehem. Bethlehem's, of course, Zone A, as I've said. Now, before the Oslo Accords, 93, 86% Christian, 14% Muslim. Today, it's the reverse. Why? Well, obviously, there's been an issue here. What's happened? Well, Palestinian control they made this into Zone A. And the Christians have been persecuted, and they've had to escape. There's a lot of lies about this. In fact, we have some well-known personalities in the United States who either don't know what they're talking about or choose not to learn about it, but are saying that the reason this is happening is Israel is causing it to happen. Well, it couldn't be Israel because this is Zone A. They don't have a control over it. It's Bethlehem, and it's in Zone A. So that's not what's going on anyway. The lies are that spread around the world that Israel's torturing and killing Christians, and that's why these numbers are going down. And obviously that is not true. They escaped here because they're being persecuted, these Christians did, because they were not being tolerated in many cases. So they went to Israel. The very opposite was true. I talked to a Christian minister one day in town there, and I know they can't, I didn't put him on the spot because I know he can't speak publicly much at all without getting in big trouble. I kind of whispered to him, I said, this is really tough being here, isn't it? And he looked at me, almost felt like it almost seemed like he had tears in his eyes. He said, really tough. And I thought, wow, this is because it's so hard. Many of them try to stay, but it's so difficult. Now, I'd like to give you a couple other personal stories highlighting Israel's very, very tight security in this case. This is an aerial view of Ben Gurion Airport. We saw it a minute ago from the heights of the Judean highlands, the so-called West Bank area, looking down, and how vulnerable this and other cities are. But this particular picture I'm showing you because it relates to a story. One of my trips to Israel, I met an Arab man from Jerusalem who was a full citizen. He lived in the old city of Jerusalem, and he was a taxi driver. And got to talking to him, and I had to go back to the airport on one of those trips by myself. I was there alone. And so I hired him to take me back because I thought he was a cool guy and I thought that'd be neat. So I did. And he had a van, a white van, that we went back in. That's the only vehicle we had. And vans are always kind of ones that are very much singled out by security because of the problems of, obviously somebody could put bombs or whatever inside. But anyway, that's what he had. So we drove to the airport, got to the very outer perimeter of the airport, and we were stopped. Now, this is pretty common. We were stopped to be checked as to, sometimes they just ask questions and then you go through the rest of the security as you get inside. But we had to go through full security right there on the spot. And so we did. We were asked to get out of the van. They went through my luggage and all that kind of thing. They asked him a whole series of questions about where he was from and what he was going to do and that kind of thing. We got back in the van. We drove closer to the point where I was going to get off and, pay him and say goodbye. And I just asked him kind of quickly, I said, did that bother you? And he said, what do you mean? I said, when they ask you all those questions and they made you get out of the van, he said, no, that's just the way it is here in Israel. I don't really feel like they single me out. They have to do this, with everybody because security is that tight. I thought that was interesting. Another one. This is a picture of a typical gas station in Israel. This is not the one where this following story took place, but it's just to give you an idea of the setting here. We were in a van similar to that one on the left, maybe a little bit bigger van. And when I say we, I mean myself and a couple other people, my wife and one other friend of ours. My wife and that other friend of ours were both sick. It turned out they had eaten some, there was issues of food poisoning and some other things that had made them very sick. And we were going to be taking them to the hospital. Had been working on an archaeology site in southern Israel, and that's where we were at the time. And so, but we had to stop at a gas station to get gas, and in order to go to the hospital, which is in a town called Beersheba, probably about 50 miles away. But anyway, I was having a lot of trouble with the tank. I couldn't get the gas to work right, and it just took me a long time. So eventually, I had to go inside and talk to the clerk. Eventually, we got it straightened out, and I got the gas in the car. He set it up so I could get the gas in the car. I came back out to put the gas in the car, and I should say the van was surrounded by IDF with guns in hand. And I thought, whoa, what is this about? And number one, I couldn't even figure out where they came from because I didn't see them before. And so I walked up and I said, what's happening? And the spokesperson came to me and he said, well, you've done something in violation. He said, you've had this van sitting here for a very long period of time unattended, and we had to check it out because of security reasons. And so he went on to apologize and that kind of thing. I said, no, I understand completely, why that would be. So I'm sorry. And he just wished us well on the trip and hoped everybody got better. So to kind of get an idea, you can tell you're not in Kansas anymore when you're in Israel because the security is that tight. And again, I couldn't even figure out where these guys came from. That was kind of blew me away. But they always apologize and they always say, we're sorry we had to do that. Every single time. I've never seen anything different. Now, what this is a map of Palestinian refugee camps. Okay. The Palestinians, there are 59 camps in the West Bank and these surrounding countries. They've been put in these camps many years ago, and in many cases they're not allowed back out. They want them in these camps actually because they're being used as kind of the look at these Palestinians in camps, look at what Israel's doing to them. But most often it's not Israel doing it to them, it's the other countries that simply want to use them for an excuse for the problems in their country by blaming these existing refugee camps. And these people do have a lot of restrictions on them. They in terms of citizenship and in the professions that they can go into, or in terms of owning land, it's not good. Of these 59 camps, those are not good situations whatsoever. They're often denied education and health services. The Palestinians get 10 times more aid per person than any group in the world. Now listen to that, 10 times per person. That's a lot. And a lot of this money is being squandered. Rather than getting them out of the camps and establishing jobs, the money is being siphoned off. No question about it. Now, here's a direct quote from somebody who worked for the United Nations Work Relief Agency many years ago. He said this, he observed this: Arab countries do not want to solve the Arab refugee problem. They want to keep it as an open sore. And I think that's definitely true. Another issue Israel has is something called NGOs, non-government organizations. In the West Bank, there's at least 100 of them. And what many of them do is they're being used for propaganda. They will try to get film of some Jewish soldier doing what they think is something wrong and then try to send it to a media source and send it around the world. Now, often these soldiers are provoked by local residents. They kind of do something to them to provoke them, to maybe making them move their gun or raise their gun or whatever. And so these NGOs, many of them, they just looking for opportunities to film situations like that, take them completely out of context, send them to the media agencies, and have them put on TV and radio and so forth to make the world think that Israel is an awful place. Israelis are this apartheid, evil country. Now, I went to Ramallah one time. In fact, that was that same trip that I talked about Bethlehem. It was that very same day. Ramallah is the capital city. It's hard to get to. And the only way we can do is, like I said before, on that tour, a tour like that. Okay, and I want to talk about that trip for just a second. When you enter the town, you see this. Okay, it says in Hebrew above, in Arabic in the middle, and in English below, this road leads to Area A under the Palestinian Authority. Remember, we talked about that. The entrance for Israeli citizens is forbidden, dangerous to your lives, and is against Israeli law. Now, our guide purposely had us stop here, and he wanted everybody to read this sign really clear, almost like he was kind of bragging. Here's what it's like. If you're Jewish, you can't enter the city, bottom line, period. What it looks like inside of Ramallah, you see all these, this is the capital city for the Palestinian Authority. You see all these beautiful families. They're really nice looking people. It's really hard to distinguish between the Palestinians and the Jews because they're both Semitic peoples. And, they pretty much look the same. But they're large families. They have very large families. When we left the city of Ramallah and we got on our bus and we're leaving the town, I asked my guide a couple of questions here. Okay, as I mentioned, he is an interesting person to say the very least. The picture on the left, just kind of by way of background, is a picture of the leader of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas's home. It's a multi-million-dollar home. It is well known that the leaders are pilfering in the ton of the money that is being sent over, of that massive amount of money. And as you can see here, that picture. And you do see from place to time in this West Bank area some very large homes and also some really nice looking cars. So you wonder, okay, where's that money coming from? The picture on the right is Arafat's tomb. And we visited that too. And when you're in there, you really don't even want to move because everything is very, very tense. Now, when we left the city, I asked the guide a couple of questions. One, I asked him, okay, in regards to that picture on the left, do you think the Palestinian Authority is corrupt? Okay, he didn't say anything right away. And I thought, I shouldn't have maybe said that. Maybe this is the wrong place to ask that question. But then he looked at me and he said, yes, everybody knows that. I thought, wow, to be that honest. And then I asked him, do you think Yasser Arafat was a good leader for the Palestinians? And again, he looked up at me. He said, no. I think Arafat did a lot of things wrong and really probably didn't help our cause overall. So I just found those candid answers very, very interesting and honest. Now, as mentioned before, when the Palestinian Authority was created in the mid-90s, okay, it was given power to govern. And one of the things they did immediately took over control of the schools to brainwash the children. And boy, have they done a job on that. They have created incredible hate teachings against the Jews in the textbooks and to just literally create a cancer that has festered over the years to the point now, since the 90s to today, 83% of Palestinians supported the incredible brutality that Hamas did against the Jews in October of 2023. So that is amazing, and that's a direct result of these lies. They've indoctrinated these children into thinking becoming a suicide bomber would be the greatest aspiration. How sick that is. Even the United Nations has been involved with this. An organization called UNRWA has been deeply involved by actually creating some of these textbooks. And this is not well known either. All right, so in other words, there's no way you could get peace until you stop these lies. It can't be done. It's like literally removing the cancer before you can start to heal. Way beginning back in first grade or even earlier, even kindergarten, martyrs are glorified as having divine status. In other words, these are our heroes, these people who have died for the Palestinian cause. Like in suicide bombers. Children are taught literacy exercises for the Arabic letter H using the term shaheed, which is a word for martyr, while jihad is explicitly described as one of the gates to paradise. So they use these letters to teach these words like shaheed, which they want them to really know that is a martyr, and a martyr is a good thing. Suicide bombers are heroes to these kids. That's what they're taught the whole time. Streets are named after them, songs written about them, and poems are honored in every way. Families of suicide bombers are giving lifetime income. It's kind of a slang term for that, pay for slay. And this money that they're being paid is aid money, a lot of it from the United States. So again, this whole idea of getting the children, okay, to get them on your side, to indoctrinate them is ancient. Modern day leaders, we've looked at these guys before, but Marx said the battlefield begins with a rewriting of history. Okay, so to start the lies, in this case, the lies against the Jews, we're going to use education to do it. We're going to use the children. And of course, Hitler, if you tell a big lie and tell it frequently enough, it'll be believed. And Lenin, give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seed I have sown will never be uprooted. This is all exactly what's going on. Now, if you eliminate the lies and hate, the Jews and Muslims can be friends. Now, how could I make that statement? Because there's examples of this. Here's one of them. This big factory right outside of Jerusalem, it's kind of like a bedroom community. It's a town called Male Abdamin, is where they originally made SodaStream. Some of you maybe even have one of those in your home. This is a home factory for making those. What was really cool about this is the Jewish owner of this factory decided he wanted to hire a lot of Palestinians. He hired 800 of them, and they got paid wages way greater than they could have gotten anywhere else in the West Bank. They were working with these Jewish workers and getting along fine. They were playing, so many of them playing sports together. It was just a perfect example of what could be. Okay, so that was all good. That was a great thing. But what was going on, what happened is this. There was an organization, actually several, that started to go against this factory, who did not want this to happen. They did not want to see this, be honest with you, this harmony between these two groups. They didn't want this example of success. So they started to attack the owner and saying, you stole the land. You don't even have a right to build a factory here. Long story short, is they dug into the title deeds and they started looking back at it. Rather than being stolen land, they said 86.4% was stolen. There was only a 0.5% of the land that they couldn't get the exact title for. The rest of it was very clearly purchased by the owner. And there was no dispute of that whatsoever. Actually purchased it at a very high price too. The BDS movement forced the owner to move the plant to just north of Beersheba, which is in Israel itself. All of the Palestinians, all of them, lost their jobs. So that's what they created. That's what they did. Now, a very big thing to the Jews is the idea of tikkun olam. And what that means is repairing or improving the world. Okay? Olam is world, and tikkun means to repair or improve. This is from an editorial I wrote. Now I want to give you a couple quick examples of Israel's contributions to the world. As kind of as we're moving towards closing of this part of the topic here. Now, obviously, no country is perfect. An important concept and religious obligation for the Israelis is this tikkun olam, repairing the world. They practice this in multiple ways. From being the first aid agency to assist world disasters, they're always the first, provide water filtration systems for third world countries, to offering free medical help to those who are taught to hate them. For over 25 years, Israel hospitals have treated thousands of Arab adults and children with life-saving surgeries. My wife and I have stayed in a small community in northern Israel several times. Neela, the lady next to our rental, is a nurse who worked in a regional hospital treating victims of Syria's war. Now, this was back a few years ago when that war was going on. The IDF opens a gate in the northern fence at assigned times, allowing the wounded in. When we asked her about her experiences, her eyes teared up, describing her work with these people. There are doctors and nurses like Neela all over Israel. So they do this, of course, free of charge to try to help these people come to Israeli hospitals, and then eventually, when they're in better shape, going back into their country. Organizations in Israel locate Arabic children from various countries who would die without life-saving surgeries. Agents contact families who are terrified at the prospect of going to Israel. Okay, since they've been taught the Jews are evil. Even some of what the Palestinian Authority textbooks, that idea is being taught in many of these countries all around Israel. Families who make the decision to be escorted into Israel find compassionate Israeli doctors and nurses who donate their time to save the lives of their precious children. One Arabic family at a time return home to tell the others the truth. Now, there are many organizations. This is one that I know about, and I know who the owner there, the organizer of this organization is. His name is Jonathan Miles, and it's called Shavat Akim. Okay, brothers dwelling together in unity is what that means. And these little babies are brought in from other countries like Iraq or Jordan and these other Arabic countries, and they will pass away. They will die without these life-saving surgeries, and they're given them free of charge in Israel. As I mentioned, when they come into Israel, they come through the gate, through the entrance. A lot of them are just scared. They think they may die. But they because they've been lied to, they think Jews are monsters. They come and they have these life-saving surgeries, and then they go home to their countries to tell their people the truth. And there's a lot of this that goes on inside of Israel that people do not know about. Now, this is kind of a long list here. I'm only going to mention a few. Israel interventions never stop. They never stop. They're doing this all the time. This is in spite of all the wars against them and all the names that they're being called and everything else. They just keep moving ahead with tikkun olam, repairing the world, like the pill cam, a swallowable camera. All right. And I'm just going to mention a couple of these. There are many of them. A lot of health benefits. The sniff phone, the nose operator. It's a breathalyzer technology for detecting diseases. So in other words, without doing surgery, open up to determine an area, to determine whether if it's cancer or whatever, they have these breathalyzers that are extremely advanced that can determine what exactly is going on inside the body. The Rewalk robotic exoskeleton enabling paraplegics to walk again. All right. And so many things. It goes on and on and on. Technology like the flash drive and so much of our computers and our cell phones and you name it. Just over and over again. And as I mentioned, the drip irrigation systems, all kinds of irrigation, water systems where they help third world countries where they're given these systems where they can irrigate, the drip irrigation type systems and others, where they're able to use literally water from the air to turn it into drinking water, believe it or not. They have these machines that can take the air around them and turn it into drinking water. And they donate these and give these to third world countries to help these people in their attempt to have a better life. Especially these water purification systems are so very, very important. Anyway, the list is long, and almost every day I hear about more. A lot of what they're centering on, though, is in the medical area, in the area of using the body's natural defenses, the T cells, to fight off these diseases. So not having to use these really toxic chemicals in the body. They're involved in so much advanced research. It's really incredible. It's such a gift to the world what is going on right now. Okay, and again, this is just a small list, and it almost never ends. This is a shirt that I own. Believe it or not, I kind of took a picture of it. It's kind of funny, but it says this. This is on the back of it. It says civilizations, nations, and empires that have tried to destroy the Jewish people, and it lists them: Egypt, Philistines, Assyrians, Babylonians, all the way down. And then we got Iran on the bottom with question marks, and that's right in the news right now. And then it says on the bottom of the shirt, it says the Jewish people, the smallest of nations, but with a friend in the highest of places. So be nice. I just got a kick out of that shirt. So Hitler and the Nazis are gone. Anti-Semitism is not dead. It is growing again. But the apple of God's eye are still alive. Listen to the words of prophet Jeremiah. This is what the Lord Almighty says. He who appoints the sun to shine by day, who decrees the moon and stars to shine by night, who stirs up the sea so that its waves roar. The Lord Almighty is his name. Only if these decrees vanish from my sight, declared the Lord, will the descendants of Israel ever cease to be a nation before me. Interesting. Well, they're all still there, and Israel's still there. This is what the Lord says. Only if the heavens can be measured will I reject all the descendants of Israel because of all they have done, declares the Lord. And this, then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now have come the salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers, which of course what this is all about, the accuser, Satan lying against Israel for all these reasons. The accuser, this is what's going to happen. who accuses them before our God day and night, and I would say before other people, have been hurled down. They overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. So that will be the ultimate result of all the lies. And then there's so much more to the story, of course, I haven't covered here, that's coming up yet in prophecy, and Israel is central. All right. Now, I know this is a little bit long, a lot of information, some background stories, but I appreciate your watching to kind of inform yourself further to understand this whole idea of anti-Israel or anti-Zionism. Part 2. The fifth session will be the most important of all. We're going to look at what should be our response. What does God say? What should be our view of Israel? All right. So today, again, thank you for watching. And I wish for you is complete shalom. Shalom.